My parents made me the other kid while my sister became their golden child and destroyed my life. I can't make my update without it, so I'm reposting it. Except for this caption, nothing has changed. It's just as it was before the moderators of the Entitled Parents subreddit took it down. After reading a similar experience online, I felt compelled to share my own. I'm publishing this as my one and only Reddit post since I felt that sharing it might make me feel a little better. I've had some counseling, and discussing this topic in particular was quite beneficial. Why not just share it online as well? I reasoned. This year I turned 18, and I recently moved out on my own, away from my parents. My sister is roughly 10 years my junior. She almost didn't make it to term because her pregnancy wasn't intended. Since I was never given much information, I don't know many specifics about how difficult my mother's second pregnancy was, but I do know that it was extremely taxing on her body. As my sister's birth prevented her from having any more children, she spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital that year. My mother also nearly died during the birth. Because my younger sister might not have been born, it caused her and my father to get attached to her. With the exception of times when they needed a free babysitter, I felt like the other kid in the house ever since. My parents' long-term favoritism has led me to believe that they were truly insane for failing to recognize the precise harm it was causing to me. Now, starting with my 11th birthday, I'll describe how it's rebounding on them. My sister was 2 years old when she wept upon seeing a birthday cake that wasn't hers. Therefore, my parents asked me to let her blow out my candles. My parents had me do it even though I didn't want to. The moment felt totally wrecked, but they relit the candles so I could do it again later. The following year, the year after that, and so on, all experienced the same thing. They simply persisted in enforcing it until it was standard. My birthdays also had to include gifts for my sister. Hers never had any on mine. When I questioned why, they simply said that I'm a boy and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I understand that was a child, but did they truly believe that what I said was wise? Not at all. Every time I had a birthday, my parents would pick a location that my sister preferred above mine. After a while, it seemed more like I had no birthdays while my sister had two. Beyond this, my sister became the center of my parents' entire existence. If I wanted to do something, my sister had to agree with me. Otherwise, it was vetoed unless I could complete it by myself. Video games didn't seem to bother me there until my sister wanted to come in and irritate me, so I learned to just lock myself in my room with them. That's why I locked the door. I was an irate teenager who was sick of being interrupted at any time, so when my parents asked me to take it off, I freaked out. My parents were mad at me for being nude in my own room, and my sister repeatedly ran in when I was naked. They retracted their objection and simply let me keep the lock after I pointed out how ridiculous it was. Because she was being pampered every day, my sister developed a princess complex. I avoided her as much as possible since she was highly demanding. I used every justification I could find to avoid dealing with her, even if it meant making things up in order to have some alone time. I had more alone time once my parents hired a teenage girl to watch me. After my sister refused to listen to her, the babysitter quit, and my parents attempted to avoid paying her by saying she did a poor job. After the girl enlisted the help of others, my parents ultimately gave her the money she was due. After that, they recruited a second girl to watch the kids on a regular basis, and she stayed. I went out of my way to keep myself occupied with my part-time job whenever I could, but my parents still made it obvious that I was expected to care for my sister on any day I had free time. My sister gave me directions and treated me like her own butler. She would not quit using her ridiculous moniker for me. The mere mention of that moniker gets me furious. She would call our parents and cry if I didn't give her whatever she wanted, and I would then face consequences for mistreating her. This led to a lot of heated disputes between us, and once I refused to give in anymore, my relationship with my parents deteriorated to the point that we hardly spoke to each other for a while. However, they had the audacity to boast to other parents that they were the reason I put in so much effort during my high school graduation. Although they weren't incorrect, the explanation they were considering wasn't the one that actually occurred. I put a lot of effort into waiting to be free. However, my parents pretended to have accomplished a lot. Perhaps they did prior to the birth of my sister. After that, though, it was all about her. Unless parent-teacher conferences were approaching, they didn't even inquire about my schooling. I received a B and C average when I graduated. Even though the trip was supposed to be for me, my sister always had more fun than I did when my parents took me there after I graduated. However, Everything really came to a head in July when I turned 18. Despite the fact that it was my 18th birthday, it didn't seem to be about me. I fervently hoped that for once, we would be dining at my favorite restaurant. Instead, they had the celebration at a local Chuck E. Cheese's copycat. It became the go-to location for anything big because it was the only one like it in the area. Kids half my age were having their celebrations all around me. I had nothing to do but eat terrible pizza and play outdated arcade games and claw machines for tickets to insignificantly expensive prizes. Since I was so bored, my parents then produced a pink cake with white flowers on it when it was time for cake. It was clearly not a boy's cake, even though it bore my name. There were only 10 candles, which was worse. In front of my sister, my parents placed the cake. My sister blew out the candles. That's when it happened at last. I suddenly experienced a mental flashback of all the repressed annoyance. I then broke down in tears. I was crying in front of the entire family as an 18-year-old boy. Time appeared to stop because everyone was so shocked. All of the things I had been suppressing for the last 8 years just poured out like word vomit. When I woke up, the whole family was able to see it. I went outside to sit beside the family car after I was finished. My parents kept the pink cake covered until it was served, so many relatives followed me to apologize and explain that they were unaware of it. The fact that they were unaware didn't matter, I said. For the past 8 years, Little Miss Sunshine had dominated my life while they all looked on. My celebrations and birthdays were all about her, so I didn't really have any of my own. Then, on the most important birthday of my life, they all expected me to simply nod and smile as usual while they gave my sister a cake that was specifically for her, even though it wasn't her birthday. Some of them began apologizing to me, but they gave explanations, claiming that they simply assumed I was fine with it since my parents had told them so. I informed them that I would never tolerate it. I just pretended to accept it after my parents made me do it every year. I instructed them to glance around as I spread my arms. Did this seem like the location I had in mind for my 18th birthday and graduation celebration? All this time, nobody even made an effort to defend me. My sister had it all, and I was just the other kid. My parents stopped allowing me to invite my friends long ago after they attempted to express their disapproval of my sister blowing out my candles, so I never even got to have them there. Was wanting a year that was about me and not her really that bad? There are 365 days in a year. Instead, because I want my own birthday, I'm treated like the entitled, avaricious brat that I am. I resumed my nasty crying. By then, my mother was sobbing too, so my father rushed outside to scold me for creating such a big spectacle. Everyone in the room now believed they were awful parents because I destroyed my sister's moment. I shouted back at him that he should understand why they are bad parents. The rest of the family surrounded him like a swarm of wolves when I said that. I had never seen anything like it before, but I guess it was better late than never. The majority of the throng rushed back inside with my father to argue with my mother after he was virtually backed up to the restaurant's front entrance. My grandparents stayed with me and expressed regret for spending so much time with their eyes closed. I'm not sure what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but they didn't return for around 30 minutes. They appeared completely defeated when they did. Both of my parents were unable to look me in the eyes, and my mother was still sniffling after sobbing so much. Both of them made clumsy excuses for their actions and promised to have the party somewhere else. However, the crowd didn't find it to be sufficient. My parents emphasized that they would never force me to let my sister blow out my candles again, give her gifts on my birthday, or make it about her in any way. One of my uncles cleared his throat pretty loudly. In addition to apologizing for bringing me a cake that was clearly not intended for me, there was another loud cough. They claimed they believed that at my age, cake was no longer a concern for me. Wow, that was a terrible thing to say. I lost my temper again and screamed at them that it didn't matter how old I was. For years, they had given my sister my birthday without any justification, and they were aware of it. I informed them that since it was too late, there was no need in having the party again. They had made it quite evident that they didn't care about me. I brought up the fact that they had destroyed 8 years of my life before I reached adulthood. What birthdays with them would I be able to anticipate in the future? My father became upset with me for saying so, but he stopped talking after the whole family yelled at him. My grandfather informed him that I was entirely correct and that the harm could not be reversed. He claimed that ever since my sister was born, my parents were terrible individuals who took advantage of me and treated me like a black sheep. Furthermore, He claimed that they were all terrible because they simply allowed it to occur. He went on to say that I was owed my life back, not just an apology. I resisted her attempts to approach me as she sobbed my name and apologized, but my mother broke down once more. She was body blocked from approaching by half of the household. I just remarked that I was at my breaking point and turned to go. I was found and brought back by one of my aunts. I was so angry that I couldn't even be happy for any justice after all this time. Even though I could hear several family members screaming and swearing at my parents over what had transpired. And throughout all of this, where was my sister? She was still eating cake and tearing apart gifts that were intended for me, alone in the restaurant, in case anyone was curious. When I sobbed and left, my parents did offer her some cake. They were later called out on it, even though you would assume it wouldn't be their main concern right now. As everyone else left the party, my grandparents persuaded me to settle down and take a seat in their vintage minivan. When my sister was discovered to be opening my gifts, she pitched a fit. One of those gifts was a brand new smartphone, which she was not permitted to retain, so she hurled it against the wall and destroyed it. A few months prior, on her own birthday, she had received a brand new phone. In the end, I became so angry that I ranted about never wanting to have another birthday party. I was allowed to spend the night at my grandparents' place. I still hadn't spoken to my folks when I got home. My father remained as silent as I did, and my mother simply kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her. My grandparents persuaded me to join them for dinner the next weekend. I was shocked to discover a completely different party waiting for me when we arrived. Almost the whole time, my parents were there grinning awkwardly and saying, "Don't hate us." A large chocolate cake with 18 candles and even a banner with my name on it was present. Since I didn't actually get to celebrate either this year, they dubbed it my happy belated birthday and graduation party. I had to act like I was delighted. 8 years of partiality cannot be reversed or even somewhat impacted by one nice party. What happened to my sister? It wasn't all about her like it used to be, so she was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip twisted. The family sang me a modified version of Happy Day instead of Happy Birthday. My sister let out an ear-piercing scream as soon as I extinguished the candles. My parents, appearing more distressed than ever, had to take her out quickly and return her later. For the remainder of the celebration, she sulked in silence in her seat. My sister was punished for her actions at the last party by having her smartphone taken away while I was still given a new one. However, there were other gifts besides the smartphone. My entire family helped out and bought me a car. Even though it was only an old white Volvo, I fell in love with it right away. My grandfather, who had some automotive knowledge, had fixed it himself. My sister was obviously not as delighted as I was. She threw a fit and demanded a car as well, letting out another one of those yells. It took some time for them to return outside after my mother had to take her to the restroom. My father simply returned to his dejected appearance. Their attempt to appear respectable in front of the entire family had been essentially wrecked by my sister. My sister was acting that way because my parents brought her up to be a pampered, entitled princess, according to several family members who also had harsh things to say about them. I immediately began driving the automobile around, but a few days later, my sister damaged it by smashing 2 side windows with a hammer and severely damaging the windshield, rendering the vehicle unusable. She screamed bloody murder as my parents grabbed her and removed the hammer, but they were able to stop her before she could do further harm. She even made an attempt to bite them. My grandfather had worked so hard on that car that everyone, especially my grandparents, was upset with my sister. It was destroyed by my sister's outburst. My sister was so indulged, my grandparents acknowledged, that she was unable to process the notion that I could have something that she was not able to have. My sister was being raised to be an entitled brat by my parents, who were criticized by a number of other family members for setting her up for failure. They said that because my parents wouldn't enforce their rules and instill respect in her, my sister would have a horrible adult life. She was not unpunished for her acts. My sister was sent to boarding school at the beginning of the new school year after being grounded for the remainder of the summer. My father maintained that it was the only way to begin repairing the harm they had caused, despite my mother's tears. Yes, they admitted their mistakes wholeheartedly. Since no one took their side, it was difficult for them to hide it. At the boarding school, my sister is very miserable. She has been lying nearly nonstop and despises the rules and the outfits. But now that there are cameras everywhere, she can't get away with any of it. She yelled at our parents for placing her in that situation, despite their repeated attempts to visit her. I've heard that she might live like this until she turns 18. My car's repairs were covered by my parents. The windshield and windows were replaced by an auto glass firm, and the vehicle now has the same appearance as before. My granddad approached me in August about a job possibility with a friend, but it was 40 minutes away. Unless I liked the lengthy journey, I would have to leave my parents' house. I was all for relocating. It was difficult for me to find my first place. To get a studio, I had to have my credit card approved, but I was able to do it. Since September, I have been residing here. I don't talk to my parents very much, yet they keep trying to reach me. When we do speak, I always feel uncomfortable and uneasy. According to my grandfather, my parents are attempting to get in touch with me because they are unable to cope with their parental failures. He believes that in order for them to feel better about themselves, they want me to forgive them. However, I will not be forgiving them anytime soon. At last, I'm content and no longer with them. Now they have nothing. Not only do they lack my sister, they also lack me. The cost of my sister's boarding school, in addition to the party they held for me and the repairs they made to my car, forced my parents to work longer hours. All they have left is their job to concentrate on, an empty house, and irate relatives. Although I don't enjoy their suffering, it is ultimately the consequence of their own deeds. Edit. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has given me awards. It holds great significance for me. Despite the fact that my piece was lengthy, I felt a great sense of relief after finishing it. In the comments, I saw some people accusing this post of being phony. I don't hold anything against you. If I were reading this, I would also be quite skeptical. I did, however, live it. That is the reality for some parents. People who had comparable or worse circumstances have even gotten in touch with me. Is it truly so strange that my parents behaved in this manner, given the abundance of horrible parents in the world? I come from a close-knit family where we stick together and do things as a group, so it may sound extreme for the entire family to rush back into the restaurant to confront my dad. At gatherings, it can quickly become the whole group versus one individual. I've witnessed it previously, such as when a cousin who was intoxicated was surrounded and taken away from a gathering to become sober. Although I really dislike collective mentalities, they were helpful in this situation. Words cannot express how ashamed my parents were of what they had done. They were unable to come up with a suitable explanation for their actions without coming across as even worse. They have essentially given up, acknowledging that they have no justification and are making a concerted effort to win my favor. I believe that a large portion of my relatives' assistance was motivated by shame, even though many of you are thanking them for it. With the exception of 2 years during COVID, the majority of them attended those 8 birthdays, but they kept quiet when my sister blew out my candles. They may have given me a critical look, but they remained silent. Why? My grandfather, the patriarch of the family, is the father of my father. My grandfather can be rather frightening. He will assist you in whatever way he can if you're on his good side. The whole family despises you if you're on his bad side. That's a major factor in my distaste for group mentalities. My grandfather felt embarrassed when he remarked that the whole family was to blame for not supporting me throughout those years. They all contributed to the price of my vehicle. They didn't need to make a significant individual contribution because they had so many relatives. Even the receipt from the time I registered the vehicle in my name is with me. They paid $2,000 for it, plus additional money for tires and parts. My granddad adjusted the fluids and tuned it himself. The interior was thoroughly cleaned by my grandmother. Even though I'm incredibly grateful to each of them, I still wish to keep my distance. To figure things out on my own, I need time. It is likely that I will not see my parents again until Christmas or Thanksgiving. My sister has been likened by some to South Park's Eric Cartman, and it's a fairly accurate comparison. Because my parents gave her a lot of junk food, she is overweight. She despises eating anything nutritious. She once topped mashed potatoes with gummy bears, as I witnessed. I feel sick just thinking about that combination. She also spent a lot of time in the restroom as a result of her bad diet. In order to assist, my parents had to purchase fiber snacks, which I don't believe were inexpensive. My sister always believed she was in charge and is also very bossy. She was always giving me directions, so I would frequently lock myself in my room to avoid her. Because she was so domineering, she lost a lot of friends, but my parents assured her that the youngsters were envious of her uniqueness. When things didn't go her way, My sister would even call herself a princess and have big tantrums. Although I'm aware that she is more than a caricature, her actions definitely remind me of Eric Cartman. I am aware that my sister is also not dumb. She simply doesn't put out any effort and only received a C average in school. She would most likely receive straight A's if she put in the necessary effort. Second edit. It appears that the subreddit has banned me. I'm not sure what I did. Perhaps the post was too lengthy. In any case, I am no longer able to respond to comments. But I would want to thank everyone who left encouraging words. Thank you everyone from the bottom of my heart. Update. Here is what has transpired since my parents began celebrating my sister's birthday 8 years ago, for anyone who is curious. It has now been almost a year. I thought I was done here, so I didn't log in for a while. However, one day I decided to check in again and saw a ton of private messages requesting updates. The majority of what I'm going to share with you is based on what my parents and grandparents told me. I'm recounting what I discovered, so don't worry if it seems too bizarre. Yes, I'm doing great, but my parents and younger sister aren't doing so well. My sister made a number of attempts to leave boarding school after I last posted. She tried doing nothing, but it didn't help her, and none of her plots or falsehoods succeeded. She then tried going on a hunger strike, not eating anything until our parents arrived to pick her up. My father prevented my mother from jumping into the automobile to save her baby, reminding her that they were to blame for my sister's actions. After fewer than 2 days of her hunger strike, my sister started to seek food in the cafeteria. Snacks and sweets were strictly prohibited at school unless they were nutritious. My parents had received a warning from a pediatrician that unless my sister's nutrition improved, she could develop diabetes in the future and possibly experience stunted growth. Gummy bears on mashed potatoes are out. My sister attempted to bully the other girls at the boarding school, of course, but they didn't put up with her. She got into a quarrel one day and was attacked by many girls who kicked her until a teacher intervened. My sister was scraped and bruised all over, but she wasn't terribly hurt. She blamed everyone else, of course, and said the other girls should follow her instructions. It should come as no surprise that her peers avoided her. She couldn't understand not getting her way, so she threw a fit. My sister was busted when my mother attempted to sneak junk food to her at the boarding school. My parents got into a heated argument as a result. Although my sister still craves junk food, my mother stopped smuggling it after being caught. My sister eventually turned to self-harm as her schemes became more complex in an attempt to influence her way out of the school. Unbeknownst to her, she stole a knife from the cafeteria and stood on a table, threatening to leave unless she got candy, specifically chocolates. Indeed, she broke her left arm, her clavicle, and suffered a concussion when she slid and tumbled off the table during a chaotic time. Even the boarding school didn't want her back at that point. She was admitted to a children's mental health facility after leaving the hospital. She is currently receiving treatment for extreme narcissism, which my parents really encouraged. Unless my parents take her out, she is unable to leave the ward. There, she continues her education and follows a rigorous, healthful diet that she hates. It is personal agony for my sister. My father and mother got into yet another heated argument when my mother sought to remove her from the ward. My mother took a bottle off the counter during the dispute and struck him with it, severely slashing his face and shattering his cheekbone. After the police were summoned, my mother was driven away in a police car, and my father was brought to the hospital. After that, she spent several months in a mental health facility where she was compelled to face her enabling tendencies and trauma. I don't know the details, but from what I've learned, my mother's behavior is a result of unresolved issues from her own upbringing. My parents are now merely sleeping in different bedrooms, though there has been discussion of a divorce. Regarding myself, I recently turned 19. At a restaurant I enjoy, my grandparents hosted a celebration for me. Although my sister was temporarily permitted to leave the ward for the event, my parents and sister were present. She sat there looking at me like she hoped I would burn, her lip twisted. Because of her forced healthy diet, she had lost weight, but her resentment had not gone away. This time, she didn't scream as I extinguished my candles. Rather, she started sobbing uncontrollably while repeatedly asking why. It was merely another attempt at manipulation. Eventually, she pitched a fit, screaming that there was nothing, no pizza, no presents for her, no prizes. She then began to curse at our parents and made an attempt to leave the restaurant. She was clearly attempting to emulate my actions during my 18th birthday celebration, but it was just another example of her incapacity to acknowledge that not everything is about her. In a twisted manner, she was essentially attempting to replicate what I had done the previous year. I know my sister, even though you might think I'm overanalyzing this. She will take action if she believes it would help her achieve her goals. My grandfather spoke to my parents before they brought my sister home early. After apologizing to everyone, my grandmother later provided me with some information. According to my grandfather, my parents had better not give in to my sister's requests or host her own party. He cautioned them that unless they permanently stopped supporting her, this conduct would never stop. After hearing this, my sister recognized that her outbursts were no longer effective. The following morning, she was driven back to the ward after being escorted out of the restaurant while kicking and crying. She is currently there. I'm not sure how long she'll be there. Even though she is only a child, she is the most obstinate person I have ever encountered. Until she reaches her lowest point, I don't think she will change. She's trapped in a situation that doesn't allow her to make demands until then. Not even my parents have attempted to hold me responsible for my sister's behavior during the previous 12 months. They've got to acknowledge that they brought her up to be a narcissist and that I had nothing to do with this. I've discovered that supporting a narcissist is a type of addiction. The only mental disorder my sister has been diagnosed with is narcissism, which she inherited from her upbringing. She has an IQ of about 110, which makes her somewhat smarter than me, but she only works hard when she receives a reward. She was conditioned to think that way, and I think it will take years to change. Regarding myself, I'm succeeding on my own. Although it's difficult, I've had to learn how to manage my finances and take care of myself, but it's still far better than living with my sister and parents. Edit. Someone pointed out that it doesn't make sense for my sister to be in a long-term facility for narcissism alone. It usually wouldn't, I agree. I'm being kept in the dark about any more diagnoses. I can sense that my parents aren't telling me everything, and since I'm not her parent, I can't just question the doctors. Nevertheless, when she doesn't get her way, my sister can be incredibly harmful to herself. It wasn't the only time she threatened herself at the boarding school with a knife. She has used similar threats to control my parents ever since she was admitted to the ward. For instance, she threatened to hurt herself if they didn't take her out for fast food after my 19th birthday. She frequently hits her head against the wall as a strategy. My mother didn't want to report this to the ward, but my father did. My sister has also made up claims of being harmed by doctors, but they never add up. Another element in her situation may be pathological lying, which is probably a major reason she is in a long-term facility. The cycle would repeat if my parents gave in to her demands once more. If she were at home, I believe Little Miss Sunshine is relying on it. Third update. My knowledge of Little Miss Sunshine has increased. First of all, I acknowledge that I erred in some of my previous writings, including misrepresenting her age and other specifics. Anyone in my family who reads this would recognize me. Even though I'm terrible at arithmetic and frequently try to hide facts to remain anonymous, to be clear, my sister blew out my birthday candles for the first time when she was 3 years old, and I was 8 when she was born. I was bitter as my parents began honoring her on my birthdays from the very beginning. By the time I turned 11, everything revolved around her. Presents bearing her name, places she enjoyed, and her assisting me in unwrapping my gifts. Even if my parents acknowledge their mistakes, the years they stole from me still remain. Concerning the diagnosis of my sister, although a person cannot be officially diagnosed with narcissism until they are 18, my father acknowledged that she exhibits symptoms of potential NPD and other disorders due to the experiences she experienced as a youngster. My mother was also diagnosed with PTSD and another mental illness. Since my sister is their problem, not mine, my father advised me to overlook the fact that my parents have kept many details ambiguous. One of the most sensible things he has ever said to me is that the present condition of Little Miss Sunshine, she has no definite release date and is still in the ward. Although some of her anger has been tamed by therapy, she still feels entitled to all I own. She even demanded her own apartment during outbursts regarding mine. She has also continued to think that my birthday is hers. She was brought up that way, and my parents are solely to blame. They have requested me to keep quiet about the matter, stating that there is no assurance she will recover and that years of therapy will be necessary. In addition to taking medicine and attending treatment, my mother has become lethargic. She was temporarily committed for beating my father, but for some reason, she kept her job. Her employer let her work from home for a lower salary. My viewpoint: since my actual birth date is eternally marred, I have made the decision to celebrate my birthday on the day of my belated celebration going forward. Returning to Reddit has caused me stress. Even though I thought I was doing okay, my supervisor sent me home for the day because I'm so irritable and cynical. To deal with this, I'm thinking of looking for free counseling or local support groups. I am grateful to everyone who has read and comprehends my suffering. Although you have shown me kindness, I must concentrate on moving past my past. I may never come back here or respond to comments. Last edit: I discovered that I had committed math mistakes once more after reading my post again. My supervisor told me to take a sick day because I've been such a mess. Stress even made me throw up. Another post I came across showed parents chopping up their older child's personalized birthday cake for their golden child. This and other posts like it made me realize how many parents are just like mine, changing only after embarrassment but remaining the same on a deep level. I'm cutting off communication with my parents and will talk to my grandparents about it more. I might not make another post here. I'd like to thank everyone who helped me.